I think I've always been interested. My best subjects at school were English and French. But I think when I moved house, I found a very old story from when I was a teenager, which now is incredibly cringeworthy. I think my stepdad would help me with my homework when we had to do writing, like writing stories for English. And I think I've just always been quite interested in it. I did English at university. I teach English. I'm just quite interested in language and reading, although I cheat and use audiobooks a lot. But I think it's just, there's a difference between writing kind of for yourself and writing thinking that you're going to print it as a book, whether or not it really gets published. But I think that since I've started having the books printed and trying to sell them, at my magic show or to friends and family and stuff, I think it's slightly different. But I had an awful experience at university where I thought I'd get you had a choice for one of the optional, what are they called? Like, not semester. Your degree's made up a lot of different topics, whatever a fancy one is for topics. I can't remember what it is now. I had a choice between something like neurolinguistics or creative writing. I thought if I go for creative writing, I'd already written half a book, this kind of action book it's just awful. But at the time I thought it was quite good. And I think I got my lowest grade of all of the modules. I think it's called a module. I got my lowest grade of all of my modules, and it was meant to be a really easy, like one where I felt like I wouldn't have to do anything. So I feel like I learned a lot from having that story just completely torn to shreds.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to the podcast. I have a great guest with me today. He is magic. All magic. Zach is here with me. Zach Powell is with me. Zach has written some books. He also does some magic, so there'll be lots of magic in here, even just in our conversation. So, Zach, welcome to the podcast. Happy to have you with
Thanks
me.
for having me.
Yeah.
You say that, but none of my books are about magic, actually.
No, but you are magic, though.
I am a magician on the side.
There you go. So you have a little side hustle. Will there be any rabbits pulled from hats during this interview?
There would be, but it wouldn't translate very well on the podcast.
No, not as an audio. No. So, yeah, we could pretend that this is happening and people would have to take our word for it. So, anyways, It's great. Thank you for being part of the podcast today. Zach, let everybody know where you are in the world.
I am in the UK. I would show you a map, actually. I teach online and I have to tell everyone where I'm from several times a day. So I'm from the Southwest. I live in a holiday kind of town called Exmouth. There's another Exmouth in Australia, actually, quite close to where I used to live in Australia on the west side. So it's very busy in the summer, which is now, and it's very quiet in the winter. And it's quite, you bump into the same people. It's quite safe for my children. It's quite nice.
So if somebody's coming to visit you, what would be one of the best things for them to see if they came to your part of the world?
I think everyone goes to the beach here.
Okay. Yeah.
So I probably go to the beach once a day, maybe.
What about the best place to go for a cafe or a food or a place to eat? What would you suggest?
There's a 3-cafe empire called Bumble. There's Bumble and Tea, Bumble and Sea, and Bumble and Tea, which has a golf course. So it's like to tee off, not as in a tea. So they're my favorite chain of restaurants. They're run by a local couple, and they started with one and then bought the other one and then bought the other one.
Nice.
So I'm quite a big fan of them.
Beautiful. Awesome. So there you go. You've got some travel advice. You've got some food advice from our guest. And if you need somebody to pull a rabbit out of a hat, Zach is here to help you. So I'm excited to have you on the podcast. So, Zach, let's talk a little bit about your author journey. How did all this start for you as far as writing books, and what got you interested originally in writing?
I think I've always been interested. My best subjects at school were English and French. But I think when I moved house, I found a very old story from when I was a teenager, which now is incredibly cringeworthy. I think my stepdad would help me with my homework when we had to do writing, like writing stories for English. And I think I've just always been quite interested in it. I did English at university. I teach English. I'm just quite interested in language and reading, although I cheat and use audiobooks a lot. But I think it's just, there's a difference between writing kind of for yourself and writing thinking that you're going to print it as a book, whether or not it really gets published. But I think that since I've started having the books printed and trying to sell them, at my magic show or to friends and family and stuff, I think it's slightly different. But I had an awful experience at university where I thought I'd get an easy. You had a choice for one of the optional. What are they called? Like not semester. Your degree's made up a lot of different topics. Whatever a fancy one is for topics. I can't remember what it is now. I had a choice between something like neurolinguistics or creative writing. I thought if I go for creative writing, I'd already written half a book, this kind of action book it's just awful. But at the time I thought it was very good. And I think I got my lowest grade of all of the modules. I think it's called a module. I got my lowest grade of all of my modules, and it was meant to be a really easy, like one where I felt like I wouldn't have to do anything. So I feel like I learned a lot from having that story just completely torn to shreds. So now I focus mainly on non-fiction, I think.
Okay. So one of the things I remember from my educational background is I remember having an English teacher tell their class that if you use a new word in a sentence 3 times in a row, it will be yours for life. And I'm like, so they use the word delved. And I'm like, and then she used it 3 times. And now it's that moment is stuck in my head. And I know the word delved and I use it now in my vocabulary where I had never used it prior to that class. And I thought that was quite unique, that was her little thing that she threw out in class, that just try adding new words to your vocabulary and don't just live with the words that you have. Continue to grow and continue to level up your vocabulary. Is that something that you'd suggest for people as well?
Well, I think I do a lot of that because I teach English as a foreign language. So I think we work on vocabulary a lot because I'm not very keen on getting them to study grammar. You can kind of do that in your own time. Mm-hmm. But vocabulary is something I focus on a bit more. So I probably do quite a lot of different ways of trying to get them to learn and memorize vocabulary.
Interesting. The one thing I'm learning too is that there are people in different countries that use podcasts as a way to learn conversational English, as kind of a reference point to kind of put that on and maybe emulate a little bit of the conversation that's going on, and then use that as a tool to kind of help build up their English as a second language.
I think there's a whole, it might be BBC, there's a whole course book which is based around old BBC kind of archived podcasts. So the whole lesson is framed around a podcast episode.
Really? That's interesting. That's interesting. So what would you suggest to somebody who has kind of not kept up their active learning in life? Is there any kind of suggestions you'd have for people as far as, because you're in that space, how do we just continue to be curious and active in our learning?
You take a course in something.
Okay.
Nowadays it's all online, isn't it? But I would try and find a way to take a course face to face. I tried to do that with maths recently, and they told me that I basically either need to be 16 again or do it online. There was no way of joining a kind of local maths class.
Really?
Yeah. So, I learn most things through YouTube. You just find what you want, start there, and then if you become interested, then start kind of doing paid courses or buying what you need.
That's good. So what are you curious about right now?
I'm starting a course at the moment. I thought I had already started it, but it's a really slow introduction to the course. But I'm starting it's called Level 2 Understanding Autism, I think.
Oh.
And so I'm starting a new job after the summer in a local secondary school where I will be a teaching assistant. But even though I'm meant to be focusing on the foreign kids who are coming here, because they're expecting quite a large amount of them from Ukraine, I'll be working with them to access the lessons better and improve their English so they can kind of keep up with the syllabus, but also helping the dyslexic teenagers with reading and writing. But I thought the kind of autism and ADHD, the kind of neurodiverse teenagers would come into it as well at times. So I saw this course being advertised, and for some reason it's free. I think the government are subsidizing it or something. So I thought I'd give that a go. It's only free if you finish it. You have to pay if you drop out or quit.
That's a good incentive. Yes, that's good. Excellent. That's a great area to work on.
And I should be able to use what I learn. I think that's the key. I think I've had ideas of, oh, you should study this, or I might study this, and then you realize you'll never really use it.
Yeah.
So if you already know why you're focusing on it, that's probably for the best.
Awesome. So let's talk a little bit about the books that you've written. You have a couple books.
Yeah. The first one, which is probably good if you're looking to learn something, actually. So if you want to learn memory stuff, I brought along my first version, which you can't see on the podcast, but it was called Mind Over Memory. And this was my system for memorizing pi and memorizing the alphabet backwards and memorizing a deck of cards.
Oh.
It's very skinny. There's not much to it because it's just my twist on some very ancient ideas. And then, when was this? Like 2017? Yeah, 2017. And then last year, I reprinted it as a book called Slice of Pie, which is a play on words for Life of Pi.
Mm-hmm.
And this is because I think when I wrote the first one, I thought I'd be into memorizing decks of cards. But then I realized I was more into memorizing pi because it doesn't change. A deck of cards, it changes all the time. So it's kind of how fast you can do it. Whereas pi, you can just keep adding more and more digits on.
Mm-hmm.
So the second version, Slice of Pie, I added the first 3,000 digits of pi at the start of the book. So in my magic show, because I'm a magician, I hand out my book and get somebody to turn to any page, and then I tell them what the numbers are because I've memorized them. So it's not a trick book or anything. It's literally just the first 3,000 digits of pi. So the beginning of the book is that. Then it's got all of the stuff that was in the original book about my methods. And then the end of the book is my code for how I've memorized pi. So I find that in memory books, they give you the information and then you have to make up your own system or your own version. Okay. And they never really show you exactly what they do. So I thought I would include that as well. Just because when I'm talking about it in my show, I can they can see exactly what I'm talking about.
So I think when we talked originally, Zach, we were talking about that in some magic tricks, without exposing anybody. There's a book that's kind of a prop book, and it's made for magicians so that they can do this without doing all the work that you've done. And your book is different in this context.
Yeah, so that might be a method. Yeah, I can neither confirm nor
yes,
deny.
Exactly. Okay. Yes.
Trick book exists. sounds plausible. So I have used one of these things in the past, and somebody went to any page, and I told them what was on that page, and then it just so happened that the next person who they passed the book to went exactly 50 pages on, and they quickly realized that when I told them what was on that page, it was exactly what was on the page 50 pages before. Oh. So I think it was at that point I thought maybe this, although it was unlikely, I thought this is not a brilliant outcome here. So I also wanted to get into doing it for real.
Yeah.
I think when I first got into magic, I was just all into how, magic and magic tricks and card tricks. And then I slowly decided that it might be more fun to do things for real. And then it's more difficult for them to guess if it's magic or not.
That's quite unique. So, okay. The whole thing around pi, this is just, it's astounding to me that this just continues to be this thing. Like, I don't understand how this all works. And to be able to memorize and be able to pull these numbers out of a book from any page, I'm kind of flabbergasted. I don't know how you would do this.
It's quite nerdy. I still swear, although I don't know if this is a false memory, I swear that years and years ago, I thought of a book idea, which would just be 10,000 digits of pi. And to me, as quite an immature teenager, it was a clever way of writing a book because you don't have to do anything. You just copy and paste in 10,000 digits of pi without any thoughts of memorizing the digits. It's just something that kind of nerdy, mathy people would appreciate. And I thought that would be a way to cheat myself or cheat my way to having a printed book. And I never actually did it. And then years and years later, I realized that what you were just talking about with trick books exists. There's several different pi books that might not involve actual pi. There might be a pattern to it. So it's quite a popular theme within magic. And there's a few themes. So like with a deck of cards, cutting to the 4 aces can be done as a magic trick. But one of the first people on Penn and Teller Fool Us did it for real. So he fooled them because they had no method. He just really did it. He trained himself to really have a quick look at the cards and then be able to just cut to them.
Wow.
And so I think I realized that premise, where there is just no method, or the method is just doing it for real, even though people think that you're cheating, that really appealed to me. Same with memorizing a deck of cards. You can fake memorizing a deck of cards.
Yeah.
Or you can do it for real fairly quickly if you train for long enough.
And then when you I would think there's be a little bit more confidence on your part presenting when you know that you've memorized it. And
because there's nothing to catch. So they can turn to any page of my book, or they can really shuffle the cards, or like with Rubik's Cube magic, I feel like it's cheating to use any, let's say, props. So nothing that looks like a cube, but it might not really be a real cube. I use cubes that you give to the audience. They mix them up, they play with them, they verify that they're really cubes, because why wouldn't they be? And then you kind of use sleight of hand or just solving it for real, because it is possible to solve a cube blindfolded, or to solve it quickly, or to, these things are possible with sleight of hand or just doing it for real.
Yeah.
So they're all quite a nerdy branch of entertainment, I suppose, but they're all doable for real. So I think I don't like, although I was into magic, I didn't really like the lying part, because it's quite disappointing when either you tell them the method or they say to you, "Oh, I saw what you did there," or, "Can I look at that prop?" And you're like, no, don't, you can't actually touch it. And the whole thing just looks really suspicious.
Yeah, that's amazing. So tell me maybe a response from somebody that when you perform this with your book and they're just like astounded. Like, what does that feel like for you as a presenter when you know that you know what you know?
It's good. At the end of a show once at a school, I do this thing where I take over a maths class at a school, and the teacher sits at the back, and I just do the whole 50 minutes or 60 minutes and do my kind of numbers, math, puzzle-based show. And at the end of one show in particular, I had to sign or autograph all of their scientific calculators. You slide off that sleeve thing.
Yeah.
I had to go around and autograph each one of them, which was quite a bizarre experience.
Have you always loved numbers and memorization all the way back when you were a child?
No, I don't think so. I used to play with cards at high school, and you'd get told off a lot by the teachers. But I kind of dabbled in magic, but not really at all. And then I went to a teaching conference, and there was a session on storytelling, and a guy did a story about the 4 jacks robbing a house. And he shows you the jacks, and the deck of cards is the house, and he puts one in the living room and one in the bedroom and one in the kitchen or something. And he asked the audience, what do they steal from each room? And then the other guy is on the roof looking for the helicopter. And he kind of elicited bits of vocabulary and bits of the story from the audience. And then at the end, you kind of riffle the deck, and the jacks all run to the top of the building and they escape from the police. And I was watching him, and I thought, I know that trick. That was a trick that I think it was one of the first tricks I ever did when I was a teenager. And so I knew what he was doing, even though that wasn't really the important part. And then I think I went on YouTube and I kind of looked up basic card tricks to learn them in order to then put a story onto it. And at the end of each lesson, I started doing a magic trick that was related to the topic of the lesson. So if we did the royal family, like a lesson about the royal family or the UK, I would then finish the lesson by doing a trick where I phone the Queen, and the Queen tells me what card somebody selected and stuff like that. But that's like 10 years ago. I was definitely an adult by the time I sort of rediscovered magic properly.
Amazing. So the whole journey of becoming an author then was something that just happened. It wasn't something that you had dreamt about becoming an author then?
I don't think so. I mean, I've always respected authors. Because I wouldn't necessarily want to be famous. A lot of people are famous nowadays for the sake of being famous. And there's something quite appealing about an author that they're not, well, they do obviously a lot become famous, but you don't really know what they look like or who they really are. So I feel like you'd kind of be famous without having all the baggage of being recognized and harassed and all that stuff. So I do quite like the, the lifestyle that would come with being an author, or at least the perceived lifestyle. I've got no idea what it's really like. But I don't know if I ever really dreamt of being an author.
Yeah. So there's another book I think you wrote as well, right? There's a children's book?
Yes. Sorry. As part of the answer for the last question, I think the first one I wrote is because people were asking me how I did what I did.
Yeah.
And then I felt like that was the perfect opportunity to put it in a book. And then it developed into the pie version because I wanted a real version of the trick. And then the one for my children, I had my first child 10 years ago. And I think I wrote the first draft for it then.
Okay.
And then I had another child 6 years ago. And I revisited the story. I shared it with some friends. And I think that's when I made it more of a rhyming book. And then I had a daughter nearly 2 years ago. And I returned to it again because you have this kind of opportunity in there. There's like a year-long opportunity where they're into these sort of picture books. And I thought it's becoming more and more of a shame that I can't give them a physical copy that they can play with, in their cot or whatever, and I can read it. So I finally finished the writing part. And then I thought I need to get it illustrated. My partner had done one illustration for it. I think when my 6-year-old was like 1 or something. So about 5 years ago, she did an illustration for it, but she could only do one. She didn't want to have to draw the character in different sort of places or different orientations. She didn't know how to reproduce it to look like the same character. So I kind of had this one illustration. And when I worked at the library during the pandemic, I ran a competition where I just had the title of my book and that one illustration. And the children, because we used to visit local schools, and I gave them the challenge of writing a story based on that picture and title. And then they all wrote their own version, which was quite interesting for me because then I got to see what their version of a story with that title was. And then we picked a couple of winners, and then I read my version for a little video for the library social media. And then maybe 6 months ago, I stumbled across an illustrator on Facebook. And I thought I've just got to do it. Like, I've just got to get it illustrated so I can have a physical version. I kind of played around with trying to just use stock images and stuff to piece it together, and it looked completely awful. And then I gave her the initial illustration, and then she went from there and turned it into a proper book.
Nice. That's great. Amazing. And what's the name of that one?
That's Luna and the Moon.
Luna and the Moon.
I think it was originally called The Moon and Me. But then I think there's a whole series of books called The Moon and Me, or a cartoon or something. So I changed it to Luna and the Moon because Luna means moon. So a lot of the students I teach, like the European students I teach, they say Luna for moon.
Okay.
So yeah, there's a copy in the car and in my daughter's bedroom and in the living room. And so she's quite often holding the book or getting one of us to read it, which is kind of what I pictured 10 years ago. So it's really nice that it's finally happened.
It's nice. It's nice to see that journey from original thought all the way through the process, and then have that for your children. That's pretty meaningful for them. I would think growing up, they're going to always remember that book, and that's going to live with them for forever. That's great.
Yeah, but it is really tough. I didn't know. I wish I had. I don't know how you apply for a job or anything. I don't know where you really learn these skills, but you find that for each part, you realize I've never done this. I don't really know how to do this. So it is, I presume there's courses for it, but I kind of want to do it again. I've got a second story with the same character, and it makes me want to do it again to sort of try and do it better than, I feel like I learned a lot from this one, and I want to apply that to another one.
Are there any authors that inspire you?
Julia something, the one who wrote The Tiger Who Came to Tea. No, did she write The Tiger Who Came to Tea? Or The Gruffalo? Is it Julia Donaldson? Maybe. We've got a lot of her books. We have a lot of the classics here, The Hungry Caterpillar. Yeah, I didn't really do it based on another author, I don't think.
Yeah. How important is it for you, for your children, to have them surrounded by good books and reading?
Yes, that's important. I kept trying to force my oldest one to be into reading, and it just wasn't working. And then I think his best friend at school finished quite a big book, and then that was suddenly the catalyst for my son to start reading.
Interesting.
Pretty much non-stop. I could go to bed and read to himself for quite a long time. He was reading whenever he could. It's kind of it's settled down a bit now. He kind of just reads at bedtime, or he reads to his little sister. But it meant that he finally got into it properly. I think it was as soon as I stopped forcing him. And then his little brother, my younger son, he's just started wanting longer stories at bedtime. So instead of kind of picture books or the next step up from picture books, he now wants, I think it was Matilda that got him into it. We've read a few Roald Dahl books since then. I think we're doing James and the Giant Peach at the moment.
Beautiful.
But he'll like sit through 3 or 4 chapters of that.
That's great. I love when kids pick up reading and that becomes a thing for them. That's great. And it just opens so many doors in the future, right?
Yeah, it's something I had worried about, I think, before my oldest one. He's the one who's kind of the most into it at the moment. I worried about it quite a bit. I might be going through that stage with my younger son, actually. But he reads to me, like he reads the books that he gets from school to me, and he's progressing. But I think I do worry about it because it's such a basic skill, or not necessarily basic, but it's kind of a fundamental skill that they can read at school. It's going to really help them.
Yeah. There's something about having the book in your hands too. Like you can read it on electronic devices, but to have a copy like you're just showing me for your books, it's nice just to be able to reach over to the shelf like you just did and pull the book off the shelf. That's kind of nice.
I don't think they ever read electronically.
Really? Okay.
No, I think they've only ever used physical copies of books.
Good. Any advice for new authors out there that are thinking about writing a book?
Yes. Just get started. I think the procrastination stage can last quite a long time. I don't know if it really counts as writer's block, but I think I've got hundreds of ideas now in my notes for books that I usually visualize as a film. And then that kind of tells me like, oh, well, just don't bother then because you're never going to get it made into a film. But I think that if I just started it as a book, I would then finish it as a book and that would be fine. But I just get as far as the title and the idea and the first chapter maybe, and then I just give up on it and move on to the next one. There's not many that I actually follow through and finish and get a copy of. But I think just persevere with it, which is easier said than done. But I have quite a scattergun approach. I just come up with loads of ideas and then I don't actually get on with any one of them.
Yeah.
And maybe don't share it too soon. All of my ideas that I share, I get laughed at. And I feel like if I actually finished it and it was fully formed, then you'd be able to explain it a lot better. But when it's just an idea, I would probably keep it private before you get put off by anyone else.
Yeah, exactly. Or somebody would take your idea and run with it. You're like, wait, that's my idea. Yeah, no, yeah, exactly.
I'm not really worried about that because I don't know how good the ideas are. Or I don't know if it's cheating, but start with non-fiction and just write about something that you know. I feel like writing fiction, there's a lot more pressure on it to be kind of funny and interesting and action-packed and, you know, really professional. Whereas if it's about a subject matter that you know quite a bit about, or you've got your own twist or thoughts on it, that's a kind of much easier way to get into it because you're not developing a plot and thinking of characters and, you know, there's a lot of difficult baggage that comes with trying to do a fiction book, I find.
It's amazing. Okay. So Zach, for people that are interested in your writings, is there a way to find the books? How can we support you with purchasing the books?
So Lunar and the Moon is on Amazon. You just type in Lunar and the Moon and my name. And Slice of Pie is technically on Amazon, but it's more on Lulu. That's one of the other things about learning how to write and publish and print books. You start delving into all the different print-on-demand companies. And I find it all quite confusing. So I started with Lulu, then I got the other one done with Amazon. So I think if you just search for my name and the title of my books, I'm most, what's the word? Not prolific. I'm most, out of social media and stuff, I'm mostly on YouTube. This month I'm doing a challenge where I'm doing a page of my book every day. So there's 31 pages of pi, 100 digits on each page on average. And so every day I'm juggling and saying the digits of pi and then spending hours editing the video because it has all of my failed attempts in it. So I'm uploading a video a day on my YouTube channel, which is the Magic Classroom. Beautiful. So you can find out a lot about that book on there.
So are you better at pi or are you better at juggling?
Juggling's really easy once you've, I don't think it takes like a day to get fairly good at juggling. It's the forgetting the digits. So my rule is that if I drop a ball or get a digit wrong, then I have to start back again from the start.
Gosh.
So today's I took 27 attempts to get the 100 digits because I kept dropping. So I gave myself a different, once you get into juggling, there's different juggling patterns and stuff that you can do. For the 10th day, I decided to give myself a much more difficult juggling kind of pattern to do. So I kept dropping the ball.
You're a brave soul.
Yeah, another challenge. I'm enjoying it. So you can kind of follow along or get the book and do it yourself.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Zach. Thank you for taking time today. Thank you for explaining your journey for writing. And, I'm really excited to share all this with everyone and to send them over to your YouTube channel as well. Get some more subscribers, right? Let's do this.
I'd love some subscribers, but thank you for the podcast. I enjoy listening to this one. Awesome. I think I'm subscribed to it, so I get all of your episodes as soon as possible. So I'm enjoying it.
Well, you're going to have to listen to this really good episode coming up. We got Zach Powell coming up. Have you heard of Zach? He's amazing.
How did you get him?
I don't know how we got him. So you'll have to definitely listen to that one, okay?
Okay.
All right. Thank you so much, Zach.
Much.
All right. Hey guys, thank you for listening to the podcast. Jump over to livingthenextchapter.com, our website, and you will see a spot where you can leave a voice message. We'd love to hear your feedback. We're trying to make it as easy as possible to hear from you. So if you want your voice on this podcast, yes, that's possible. Go to livingthenextchapter.com, click the little microphone icon, leave a voice message. We'll insert your message into the podcast. Tell us where you're listening from. Tell us your favorite guest. Maybe there's a guest we should have on the podcast. Maybe you should be our next guest. Leave us a message. livingthenextchapter.com. Again, thank you so much for listening. Please share this podcast episode with one person. That's all we're asking. Meet you over there at livingthenextchapter.com. Thank you for listening. Thank you for sharing. Love to hear from you. Till the next episode. It's coming up right away. Be sure you hit that subscribe button. Thank you for being part of Living the Next Chapter. Thank you for supporting our guests. Have a great day.
Mindshift Power Podcast, the podcast for teenagers and those who work with them. There's a huge problem in America today. There's a very large disconnect between teenagers and the adults who work with them. I'm looking to bridge that gap with real, raw, honest conversation, not held back by the chains of political correctness. You cannot solve a problem you do not understand. Want to understand teenagers today? Listen to this podcast. This podcast is for teens in the U.S. and Canada. To learn more, go to fatimabay.com/podcast or just look for Mindshift Power Podcast on any listening platform. I look forward to you being a faithful listener.